The rusted pile of twisted metal shimmered beneath the bright morning sun like a mountain of broken dreams. Every employee standing in the factory yard believed they were watching another man being humiliated. They laughed quietly as an old pickup truck slowly rolled toward the scrap heap, its faded blue paint matching the tired eyes of the man behind the steering wheel. For 10 long years, Rowan Mercer had been paid not with respect, promotions, or fair opportunities, but with discarded machinery, damaged vehicle parts, and worthless-looking scraps that everyone else considered garbage. Even the powerful CEO, Celeste Vaughn, smiled whenever another truckload of useless metal was dumped in front of him instead of a proper bonus. No one imagined that the silent single father collecting their trash was quietly building the future that would one day erase their empire from the automotive industry. Rowan never argued. Every morning before sunrise he prepared breakfast for his 8-year-old daughter, Ivy, braided her hair with clumsy but loving hands, packed her school lunch, and drove her through peaceful streets glowing beneath clear blue skies. His life revolved around keeping one promise he had made beside his late wife's hospital bed years earlier. He had promised that no matter how difficult life became, Ivy would grow up believing that kindness was stronger than bitterness. That promise became his greatest strength every time he walked through the enormous gates of Vaughn Industrial Motors, where thousands of workers admired luxury cars that ordinary families could never afford. Most people believed Rowan lacked ambition because he accepted every unfair assignment without complaint. He repaired damaged assembly equipment, worked overtime without recognition, and volunteered to organize forgotten storage buildings filled with defective engines and abandoned prototypes. What no one understood was that Rowan saw value where everyone else saw waste. Every cracked gearbox, bent frame, discarded battery casing, and rejected electric motor taught him something. Every broken component carried a lesson hidden beneath layers of dust and rust. Instead of feeling insulted whenever management rewarded him with scrap metal instead of meaningful compensation, he carefully sorted every piece, loaded it into his old pickup, and stored everything inside a weathered barn on the small piece of land he inherited from his grandfather. The executives joked that Rowan was running the world's biggest junk collection. Celeste herself once toured the storage yard during a company inspection, smiling confidently beneath the warm afternoon sunlight as she mocked the growing mountains of discarded equipment. She believed the quiet mechanic represented everything weak about ordinary people. She celebrated aggressive competition, expensive branding, and flashy innovation while ignoring the wisdom carried by experienced workers who understood machines better than spreadsheets. Months became years, and years quietly became a decade. Every afternoon after finishing his shift, Rowan returned home where Ivy waited with endless curiosity. Instead of expensive toys, she spent evenings helping her father clean old engine blocks, organize electrical wiring, and sketch strange vehicle designs across worn notebooks. Their tiny workshop slowly transformed into a classroom where creativity replaced wealth. Ivy learned mathematics by measuring wheel alignment, science by studying battery chemistry, and resilience by watching her father refuse to surrender to disappointment. Their happiest moments happened beneath bright daytime skies with the workshop doors wide open as birds sang nearby and neighbors smiled at the father and daughter who always seemed hopeful despite having so little. Far away inside the glass towers of Vaughn Industrial Motors, success had begun changing Celeste. Profits climbed each year, luxury vehicle sales broke records, and shareholders praised her relentless leadership. Yet hidden beneath impressive quarterly reports were dangerous decisions. The company cut quality inspections to reduce costs. Engineers' warning about long-term reliability were ignored. Designers focused more on appearances than durability. Marketing replaced craftsmanship as the company's greatest investment. Customers continued buying beautiful cars, but mechanics quietly noticed the growing number of expensive failures appearing only a few years after purchase. Rowan noticed those failures too. Every broken vehicle arriving for repair revealed another weakness. Every failed battery pack suggested a better solution. Every overheating motor inspired another improvement. He filled countless notebooks with observations gathered through honest labor rather than expensive research laboratories. While executives celebrated short-term profits, Rowan slowly assembled ideas capable of changing the future of transportation. His greatest challenge was never engineering. It was survival. Medical bills from his wife's illness had consumed nearly everything they once owned. The small farmhouse constantly needed repairs. Some winters brought barely enough money to keep the heating running. Rowan often skipped meals so Ivy could enjoy healthy food without realizing their financial struggles. Yet every sacrifice reminded him why quitting was impossible. His daughter deserved a future built upon integrity rather than resentment. One unforgettable spring morning, as golden fields stretched beneath clear blue skies, Rowan discovered something extraordinary inside another shipment of discarded factory equipment. Hidden beneath crushed steel frames sat several experimental electric drive systems rejected during an abandoned research project. The company considered them worthless because they failed unrealistic corporate performance targets. Rowan immediately recognized something everyone else had overlooked. The motors were not failures. They simply required a completely different design philosophy. That evening he worked until sunset surrounded by carefully organized scrap parts while Ivy completed homework nearby. Piece by piece, forgotten technology merged with years of practical experience. Broken aluminum became lightweight structural supports. Damaged battery modules were rebuilt into efficient energy systems. Rejected software controllers received entirely new programming. Slowly, impossibly, a prototype vehicle emerged, not luxurious, not flashy, but remarkably affordable, reliable, and easy to repair. Months of testing followed. The vehicle survived rough country roads, intense summer heat, and thousands of kilometers without major mechanical problems. Farmers admired its strength. Delivery drivers appreciated its efficiency. Small business owners loved its low-maintenance costs. Rowan finally realized he possessed something the largest corporations had overlooked, a car designed for ordinary families rather than wealthy collectors. Still, he hesitated. Launching a company required money he did not possess. Then something remarkable happened. People whose vehicles Rowan had repaired over the years remembered his honesty. A retired teacher offered savings she had carefully protected for decades. A local mechanic donated workshop space. Farmers volunteered materials. Former co-workers quietly delivered more discarded equipment after realizing Rowan had always treated them with respect. Nobody invested because they expected quick profits. They invested because they trusted the character of the man leading the dream. Within 2 years, a modest manufacturing facility stood where an abandoned warehouse had once crumbled beneath weeds. Sunlight poured through newly installed windows as local families assembled vehicles with extraordinary pride. Rowan named the company Everrise Automotive, believing every person deserved another chance to rise no matter how many times life treated them like scrap. The first production models sold out almost immediately. Customers praised their reliability. Repair costs remained incredibly low. Independent reviewers celebrated their honest engineering. Word spread faster than anyone expected. Meanwhile, Vaughan Industrial Motors dismissed the tiny newcomer as insignificant. Celeste laughed during interviews whenever journalists mentioned Everrise. She believed billion-dollar corporations could never be threatened by a company founded inside an old warehouse by a mechanic who spent years collecting junk. She had no idea that history was quietly preparing its answer. The following 3 years transformed the automotive industry in ways that experts never predicted. Under clear blue skies, long lines of customers gathered outside Everrise automotive dealerships, not because the company offered the fastest or most luxurious cars, but because every vehicle represented honesty. Rowan insisted that every employee personally inspect each automobile before delivery. He introduced lifetime technical support, affordable replacement parts, and training programs that helped local mechanics repair the vehicles instead of forcing customers to return to expensive service centers. Families who had spent years struggling with unreliable transportation suddenly found hope in cars they could truly afford. Farmers, teachers, nurses, delivery drivers, and small business owners proudly drove Everrise vehicles across the country, becoming living advertisements for a company built from compassion instead of greed. At the same time, Vaughan Industrial Motors faced problems that could no longer be hidden. Reports of expensive mechanical failures spread rapidly. Customers complained about impossible repair costs and poor customer service. Investors who had once celebrated record profits began questioning every decision made by Celeste Vaughan. Stock prices fell month after month. Newspapers published comparisons showing that Everrise vehicles consistently outperformed Vaughan's luxury models in reliability, efficiency, and long-term ownership costs. The company that had once laughed at a quiet mechanic now found itself chasing the very standards he had created. Celeste refused to believe it at first. She ordered emergency meetings, hired expensive consultants, and launched massive advertising campaigns promising innovation. Yet every strategy failed because trust could not be bought with marketing. Customers remembered how Everrise treated them like family while Vaughan treated them like numbers. The difference was impossible to ignore. One bright morning, the news every business channel had been predicting finally arrived. Everrise Automotive had become the nation's fastest-growing car manufacturer, while Vaughan Industrial Motors announced factory closures, thousands of layoffs, and massive financial losses. The empire that had towered over the industry for decades was collapsing beneath the weight of its own arrogance. Ironically, the company was forced to auction machinery, equipment, and unused inventory as scrap. Rowan received an invitation to attend the public auction. When he stepped into the familiar factory yard, sunlight reflected from the same rusted metal piles where he had stood countless times during those painful 10 years. Many former employees recognized him immediately. Some lowered their heads in embarrassment. Others smiled proudly, remembering the humble man who had never stopped believing in himself. Rowan walked quietly through the yard, touching the worn machinery that had once been considered worthless. He remembered every insult, every unfair reward, every lonely drive home with another truckload of discarded parts. Yet instead of anger, he felt gratitude. Without those scraps, Everrise would never have existed. Celeste watched him from the factory entrance. She no longer looked like the untouchable executive who had ruled with absolute confidence. The stress of losing everything had replaced pride with exhaustion. She slowly realized the greatest mistake of her career had never been paying Rowan with scrap metal. Her greatest mistake had been failing to recognize the value of character. She had judged people by titles instead of integrity, by appearance instead of potential. Rowan purchased several pieces of equipment from the auction, not to celebrate Vaughan's downfall, but to save jobs. Within weeks, Everrise expanded production and offered employment to hundreds of workers who had lost everything when Vaughan Industrial Motors closed its factories. Rowan personally instructed his management team to hire people based on skill, dedication, and honesty rather than their previous employer. Families who feared losing their homes found new hope beneath the bright daytime skies as Everrise welcomed them with respect and dignity. The story reached every corner of the country. Journalists expected Rowan to boast about defeating the woman who had underestimated him for a decade. Instead, they found a man who simply smiled while standing beside his daughter, now a confident young engineering student helping design the company's next generation of affordable electric vehicles. Rowan explained that revenge never built anything lasting. Kindness, patience, and hard work always created stronger foundations than bitterness ever could. Ivy often remembered the old barn filled with rusted metal and broken dreams. She would smile whenever she walked through Everrise Modern Research Center because she knew every advanced design had begun with her father's belief that nothing and no one should be judged as worthless. The greatest lesson she learned was that people often throw away opportunities simply because they cannot recognize their true value. Years later, a small museum opened inside Everrise headquarters. At its center stood Rowan's faded blue pickup truck alongside one of the original piles of scrap metal that had started everything. Visitors from around the world came to see it, amazed that an entire automotive revolution had grown from materials everyone else had discarded. A simple plaque carried the message Rowan wanted every child to read: character determines destiny far more than circumstances ever will. Before we reach the end, please leave a comment with the words, "Kindness always wins," if you believe that hard work, humility, and second chances can change a person's life. Your comment may inspire someone who is struggling today. As the years passed, Everrise Automotive became known not only for building dependable cars but also for building dependable lives. Scholarships were created for children who had lost a parent. Training centers gave unemployed workers new careers. Communities once forgotten found new opportunities because one single father refused to let humiliation define his future. The greatest victory Rowan ever achieved was not putting another company out of business. His greatest victory was proving that compassion could succeed where pride had failed, that patience could outlast cruelty, and that every piece of life's scrap could become part of something extraordinary when placed in the hands of someone who refused to give up. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that kindness and perseverance always have the power to overcome injustice, please like this video, share it with your family and friends, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Kindness Tales Journey. Your support helps us continue sharing inspiring stories that remind the world that hope is never wasted and that every second chance has the power to change a life forever.